Hello, and welcome to the Economics of Printing panel. I am Shelby Jenkins. I'm from the American Psychological Association. I need to be louder. Okay, here we go. Okay. I don't know if it would be to be louder, but okay, I will be louder. Okay. Take this opportunity to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. Start here.
Great, thanks. I'm afraid to do this. I did this once before to talk about the age of my company, and everybody else was older. But I'm going to say it anyway. I'm a 170-year-old softcover book manufacturer located in upstate New York. We do softcover books and distribution. The name of the company is Vicks Print and Distribution.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Jonathan Huddart. I'm from CPI in the UK. So those who aren't familiar with us as a business, we're a European print group, and I spend a lot of my time working on our print-on-demand business in the UK.
Hi, I'm Matt Kennell. I'm the Executive Director of Sales at VersaPress. Not over 100 years, around just under 90 years in book manufacturing.
I want to clarify that, Dwight, you're not 170 years old. Your company is. Yeah, that's Dwight Vicks. I'm Rich Letchinger. I am the VP of Sales for the Trade and Education Group at Sheridan. At least for a couple more weeks, I'm going to be leaving the industry. Just retirement, just age.
Fair enough. So we put together a couple questions. Some were submitted as well. And so we'll just run through them, allow the panelists just to discuss them. And then we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. Since I'm not out there to ask questions, that means everyone else has to ask questions. Okay. Okay, so we'll start off with what are the printers seeing in the various publisher markets? And since everyone is in a different market, give everybody an opportunity to speak.
Same order? Okay. So we're each going to talk about different markets. We're kind of niche publishers, smaller niche folks. And I think I love Bill Rojak, by the way. His candor is so important. And we saw the same thing. I mean, our publishers had a very slow start to the year, and many of them sell through Amazon, and I think that's been discussed, that they changed some of their order patterns, and so things are busier now, but we'll get into some of the challenges they're facing, but niche folks tend to be unique in different channels, but ultimately at the same time, they're trying to do the same things we all are, sell good product.
So kind of trends that we're seeing in our market, kind of the notes I made were generally we're seeing an increased push for increasing speed and turnaround time for our clients. A lot of what we're doing is now going kind of direct to consumer rather than into distribution centers. So speed to market is becoming really, really paramount. Competing with the kind of the book on a shelf from an Amazon or whatever, doing that in a print on demand world is very important. Other trends that we're seeing, I'll talk about it. It was mentioned in the talk this morning. Kind of print in distribution is something that CPI has embraced within our business. 4 years ago, we built a print-on-demand facility within a publisher distribution center. And I think other trends that we're seeing is just everything in print-on-demand is about technology. It's about integration, and finding resource in our business to support that is a challenge. And making sure that we can move at the pace that we want to, but more importantly, the pace that our customers need us to, is a kind of real challenge and something that's always on the agenda for kind of internal discussions in the business.
So yeah, we're seeing similar things to what has already been shared, but yeah, quantities seem to be lower as a general rule, more frequent reprints. I offered to speak about the religious book market, which VersaPress serves a lot of clients there as well as in trade and across the spectrum. But yeah, the religious market this year I think has kind of outperformed general trade. We're seeing a lot of growth and kind of specialty editions, cover treatments kind of coming back and having a resurgence. But yeah, definitely a lot of uncertainty in terms of near-term and long-term demand.
You mentioned that Bill was candor. He was a bit of a Debbie Downer, but I'm going to take on that role, Bill, a little bit in being candor, using some candor. So again, I have two responsibilities. On the education side, let's talk about that a little bit. As you know, there are adoption years, and 26 is an adoption year, so we are anticipating a huge demand in the education sector next year. Let's be honest, there are less manufacturing facilities to produce that work than there were in the past. Very specifically, Sheridan closed a plant in Wisconsin, Lakeside Book Company closed Menasha. That capacity is gone. So we need to be realistic about planning and do that. This year in education, it's, school does begin in the United States around the same time every year. And there was a concern of what to manufacture. So there's been a late surge in digital printing that we've seen. On the trade side, it's been a very challenging year. I would say that, as many of you know, the romantasy, that's romance and fantasy section, is the clear winner right now. Go to Target and you can see all those books, and many of them have stained or edge printing on them, which we appreciate. That has been helpful to the trade sector to have that capability or that demand. But the rest of the market's very soft. I think that the desire to watch your pennies as the finance people continue to run more and more businesses makes a whole lot of sense. But for us to be able as an industry to respond that quickly, as you heard, we have to have the paper, and the paper mills need to have some forecasts from us and things like that. We'll talk about EUDR later. That's clearly the big elephant in the room. But I just would stress that pre-planning more than ever, and I know that in many segments you can't do that, but you almost have to. You're going to have to take some risk to figure out what you might need and work with your whole supply chain vendors to figure that out.
Thank you. And Matt, you kind of touched on this, but what have you seen trend-wise from your clients? Thinking about print runs, lead times, availability of ink and paper and other components, as well as labor and capacity. So anyone could take this, even though I said Matt. Print run lengths, the romantasy, boom has fallen off a little bit, where we were seeing, runs of 70,000, very frequently on some of those titles. We've seen that kind of be maybe cut in half. We've also, lead times have been very much, have come down quite a bit in 2024, 2025. I think the fall seasons brought some busyness back to some of the book manufacturers. We're certainly seeing a lot more activity and throughput on the hardcover side. So there's definitely some strains on capacity there. Overall, I think labor, the last one you brought up, labor and capacity, I think capacity is still fairly outpacing demand. And labor has improved for book manufacturers. The quality of your candidates that are coming through the door, vary from time to, I feel like that's, we've had, more ease of hiring, not that it's easy, but just that it's having better luck with that. But that still hasn't changed the general trajectory of automation in our industry and looking to reduce our labor cost.
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm glad that Matt's finding labor. I wouldn't say that we're having the same success across 12 divisions across the country. Look, let's be realistic. Someone used the term a bunch of years ago about the silver tsunami. Well, we're in it. And if you think about the knowledge that a press person, and I was in our facility in Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago, and I was very pleasantly surprised that most of the high-end equipment that used to be a guy's job, there was at least one woman working on it. So that's wonderful for broadening the capability. But we're losing as an industry a lot of knowledge, and you're losing it on your side too, right? You have younger employees, and that's just wonderful. But they may not understand all the subtleties of the graphic arts. And so that's something I think we together have to keep focusing on, because occasionally you'll get a request that is just impossible to manufacture, and salespeople always want to say yes. So you have to politely say, well, here's why I'm going to say no, but I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. So I think a trend is understanding that we all have to take the time to be educating ourselves a little bit as you have new employees and we have our senior employees leaving the business.
So kind of talking about trends, going back to the first question, in our kind of litho trade business, I think I've seen a real kind of divergence from our customers where some parts been looking for a very cheap commoditized product. How many pence can I pay for this book? It's going into supermarkets, retail, discounted resellers. So we see a lot of kind of move towards a kind of low specification product, cheap paper, cheap board. But then we also see the absolute opposite end of the spectrum in our market, where we see books being kind of curated as objects and something that people want to make really, really beautiful. In our domestic market in the UK at the moment, we have a lot of subscription-based products that are going out to consumers. They're buying it at a very high price. It means they can afford to pay more for the books that they're buying from us. So actually there's lots more embellishments, lots more finishes. We're doing so many books with sprayed edges and digital edges and kind of really, really kind of high-end production. And that I'd have said 2 years ago is a bit of a trend and a bit of a flash in the pan, but actually it's building, it's growing. We see it in people's autumns list and springs lists that are coming, and it's something that we are continually having to invest in because we know there is a kind of real increased demand for that, and it seems to be kind of sticking. And I think because that's not going into retail, it's not going into kind of discounted areas for publishers, they're seeing that it's a market that's different and is attracting a kind of different consumer for them, I think. So that's something that's being really positive. Everywhere else, we see kind of publishers kind of de-risking in terms of stock they want to hold. So that's pushing us on lead times for when we're delivering. You know, they want to print less more often, and that continues to get lower and lower and more frequent. In terms of kind of people and kind of skills in the business, something that's been supported in the UK has been a lot of apprenticeship schemes in our manufacturing businesses. And I can go into some of our, particularly in our book binderies, where you've got those real analog skills, those guys that are blocking books and learning to do some of those things that you can't digitize and you can't workflow. Actually, we've had the guys that are in their 60s training the guys that are in their early 20s, and that's incentivized by the government. There's a few tax breaks for people to do that, but actually that's really, really worked. And actually I can walk around our factories now and stand next to a blocking machine that previously would have been the old boys, and actually it's young lads in their mid-20s that are doing there, that have learnt the skills, and there is a bit of a transition. And I think that's something that we've kind of followed as a business, but something I think that's been enabled and incentivized by kind of tax breaks for companies to do that as well.
Similar trends, and like Bill's talked about numbers of paper mills today versus what, 5-6 years ago. I'm afraid those numbers are similar in the print book world. There's a lot less of us than there used to be, and so to your point, you know, Rich, that the planning and approaching this as a partner is vital for all of us to survive. I think we've been able to do that in terms of a trend. We used to be in a complete offset house. We had web presses. We have no more offset equipment. So we're following the trends that these guys are seeing. So we're completely digital now to respond to our client base anyway that wants to produce a lot shorter quantity, keep inventories down, free up cash, remove warehouses and things like that. We also got into distribution to diversify, you know, because trying to be the low-cost producer is a difficult strategy. But the positive on the labor side, though, I will say is that, you know, the digital equipment is a lot easier to run. One of our guys said, if you can work an iPhone, you can run an inkjet, and there's some truth to that. So we've actually had some improving trends like you've seen in terms of as we go out and try to find new labor, the quality's better, but also what we're asking them to do isn't as challenging as
it's
running
frankly a
those
little
offset
sexier
press.
than
Yes.
running a machine that you have to have a wrench and get on the floor and fix from underneath, right? I mean, realistically, so that's great as we're an industry looking to hire new people to offer them access to work a machine that is a machine that's high tech.
Absolutely, and I like your term sexy, but the reality is nobody wanted to kind of get their hands dirty on an offset press, but our factories, if you've been to see them, they're clean, they're like computers, really, and it's kind of cool now. So we've got to remarket what it is that we do. It's exciting. We're producing great content, great concept, great books that help people better themselves, enjoy, and so it's sexy again. It is? That might be a push, Rich.
Yeah, I would say, too, to add to that, on the offset side, an offset press today, looks a lot different than an offset press, did 10 or 15 years ago. Same way with digital press technology, and just seeing how quickly that's, changed and improved, and the print quality. On the silver haired thing, I'm holding out a lot of hope that that does not mean that we're getting too old. So I'm trying to hold on to all my brown hairs I can. But yeah, on the offset side, what we're investing and looking at, okay, when we purchase a new, Heidelberg press, we're basically reducing our labor by 1.5 operators is all we need versus 3 operators, as an example. And so as people retire, there's a pipeline of people coming in to replace them in their early 20s, late 20s. On the apprenticeship program type thing you brought up, I find that very interesting, because I feel like we've went away from that model a little bit and have really made sure that there's avenues to hire in talent directly into being a folding operator or a press room operator, so not having to start an entry level position and kind of work their way up, and that's kind of helped as the labor market got tight during the pandemic.
Main takeaway, it's sexy. Okay. I'm going to jump ahead to just, to the last questions, just because I want to make sure we have time to discuss it, because everybody cares about it, which are, how are printers managing EUDR concerns? Okay, let's get it out of the way. How are you managing the needs of publishers? What are your timelines and other complexities look like? Because Big Bill has made it very clear this isn't an easy task, as well as pricing and availability of compliant paper based on demand. Anyone can jump in.
Well, I'm retiring in 2 weeks. That's how I'm responding. No. It's a great question. Every one of us has a similar point of view. So let's start with, I believe that every printer wants to support your ability to be EUDR compliant. We're not fighting you in any way. We want your business. We want to help you sell your product anywhere in the world. So we're on Team EUDR with you. We're the middle person. It's the paper people that have to start. And just so you know, in very sort of basic terms, they have to determine where those trees were cut down and document that and send that information in some electronic format to us. We have to document that we're using that paper that was documented on a set of product you want us to send to you. And we have to give you some digital information, which you have to file with the European Union. So that's about as simple as timeline that I can give you. So every one of those elements, we do this in the United States with food. We literally know when there's a hamburger recall, they know it's because it was from a set of cows somewhere that they can track. We don't do that with paper in the United States. And so there's a lot of, you're going to hear from very talented people throughout the day. There's a lot of energy going into that, but we're not necessarily data scientists who can take something that didn't exist. So I guess cooperation is the number one thing that you're going to have. One other thing, we've taken as a company the assumption that it is going to happen. There was some discussion about will it be stayed and will it be delayed? Of course, none of us know, but it's September 15th. And so here's the last thing you have to think about. If you're going to manufacture books in the next 60 days that you might ship into the European Union after the first of the year, you're going to have to think about the EUDR compliance of the paper that you're manufacturing on today. And and we don't necessarily have all those systems to do that. But if I were a publisher, I would much rather say, hey, I manufactured this book in October on paper X. And we now know on January 1st that paper X is from a EUDR compliant mill. That seems to me to be a wise business plan.
Okay, I'll go. So yeah, and I would add, I agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of, we've taken the approach of that EUDR compliance is something that we need to do. There's not a good way for publishers to segregate out that 5 to 10% of their business that may go into the EU. But the trajectory, I guess, where VersaPress is at, we're working with a third-party service provider to help kind of onboard our mills into their EUDR software. So I think we're like on week 9 out of 16, something like that. So we do have some EUDR information from mills that we're working with. Our timeline is kind of to be EUDR compliant starting in November. So hopefully that timeline holds.
So I kind of feel like EUDR is my number one topic of conversation with everybody at the moment. I think I used to sell print. I think I'm just a kind of an EUDR consultant and counsellor at the moment for kind of all of the clients that I speak to. I think from where I sit, kind of UK, we're not in the EU, but we're very, very close. I don't think this is going to get deferred. I don't think it's going to disappear. I think enforcement may soften, but it's there. It's legislation. It's not going to not be there. In terms of kind of what we see from customers, already starting to see people print their books in the UK and Europe for spring next year because they just want to manage their risk as much as they can and go, I may revert back and ship those books later in the year, but actually I don't know what to do now, so I'm going to do the thing that's the least risky out of all of my options. Might cost them a bit more to do it because they're splitting print runs and what have you, but I think people see that as a really viable solution for them at the moment. In terms of what we're doing as a business, I mean, it's a world of due diligence. Bill mentioned my colleague Lisa over there. I kind of just repeat what she's told me. Lisa is our kind of font of knowledge and spends an awful lot of time understanding it. But we have to, as a business, we can't ignore it. We're a European business as well as a kind of UK entity. I did have something else to say, but I've forgotten. So I'm going to pass on and then I might come back.
So in the smaller niche space, it's being talked about, but we haven't had to fill out those big surveys that Rich or you guys, and I'm impressed with what you guys are doing at Versa, and you live it, right? Because you're in Europe. Look, I've always felt we all want to do what's right in terms of the environment. I mean, my kids grew up in my hometown. Why wouldn't I want to use environmentally responsible inks and recycle my paper? And, these are the communities we live in. I do think it's a little bit overreach. The intention might be good, but the amount of data that they're asking us to track, what on page 64, this was a tree that grew in Vermont, that is unreasonable. I just don't think that's commonsensical. So we heard a great talk at a previous BMI event where I think and Lisa would know better because she is the expert. One of the major things was different raw materials. There's clearly been clear cutting and all that terrible stuff that none of us want to embrace or support. But North American paper mills don't do that. They're really responsible. The Fort Ticonderoga mill and where we used to buy some paper where it used to be an international paper mill, there's a fish tank in the front where the fish swim from the mills, the water that comes out of the mill, and the plant manager drinks a cup every year, just to prove how much they care about, how they're managing the process of making paper. So, fortunately, I haven't had to live the risk as much as some of the larger players because we're a smaller group. But at the same time, I think we have to say to ourselves, there's some of this stuff that probably is overreaching, that we can still accomplish the objective without all this administrative burden and risk of penalties, right? And one of the other points that was mentioned, because I believe there's a lot of teeth in this law for penalties, but I don't think they're going to come after Versa or Vicks or if one of our books ends up in Europe that didn't comply. I think they have bigger fish to fry was one of the points. I'm not living in denial, but I'm just saying that it's risk. We're all managing risk, right? And I know we all feel it, but I think there could be some more intelligent dialogue about trying to mitigate some of the regulations that we're being asked to fulfill.
Remembered what I was going to say. So a couple of things talking about that. So I think the risk to publishers is actually, it's not, if you're not a European business, you can't be fined, you can't be sued. It's European Union legislation for businesses in the European Union. What that means to publishers is who is doing that transaction for you in the European Union. And actually that's probably a bookseller, a reseller that's doing that for you. They are the businesses that are at risk. And if you're selling your books through Amazon.de in Germany or Libri, another big kind of distributor in the European Union, they are the businesses that have the risk and the exposure. None of us. I work for a UK business. I'm not in the European Union. None of you guys are. They're the people. And I think what publishers may see is that those businesses won't sell your books because they don't want to take the risk of them being fined. The legislation is 4% of annual turnover is the maximum for a fine. If you're a big, that's big numbers. So they can't be ignored. The second thing I was going to say, which is probably a really unpopular thing, is there's a cost to this in our business. We are going to have to levy fees to our customers to provide some of these services to them. This doesn't come free of charge on the back of everything else that we're doing. We have people that are starting to manage. Lisa. We have people supporting Lisa managing this data. We have IT guys building systems and solutions. This can't come just wound up in our print costs for publishers. It's too heavy. It's too onerous. So we will see our business, and we're talking to our customers, and actually they're kind of fine with it because they understand and they've got costs in their business. So there is a charge for this service, and providing that compliance will come with a cost.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Yeah, I agree with that there is a cost, and like right now, the number one project on our IT department's palette is EUDR, and so it's kind of a full-time working back and forth with the service provider, and now on one positive side, it has at least helped us to, in terms of, I guess I shouldn't say helped us, but it's pointed to ways that we can make our the tracking of product, your work in progress more real time. So we're doing a lot of things with tablets as a part of implementing this solution so that we can, but it's also helping with things in terms of just tracking internally work in progress. But it is going to, I think there is going to be some sort of a cost to the mills to, do all this geolocation of data. It is a big undertaking.
The two main vendors who are the software companies that you could employ and we could partner with to get the data. The essence of this is there needs to be a data file that's sent to the European Union so that when your book shows up, it's called a traces file in the system. They can go in and say, oh, this is from publisher A, and they registered that they did everything they needed to do. We're going to let the books in, right? So, but to your point about who might get the burden, because it's the sales rep for one of the software companies said, well, think about Ralph Lauren. But I don't think about Ralph Lauren. Well, they design and make high-end wallpaper, and they manufacture it in the United States and they ship it around the world. That's somebody that would make a big splash if they were able to say, I'm sorry, you can no longer, we've just fined Ralph Lauren because they sent wallpaper into a designer in Paris and it wasn't compliant. So I think that we're not sexy enough potentially to be the big hitter. And two other points. We are very responsible. I like to make things simple for everybody to get, but literally this law was designed for the Amazon and for Indonesia where they're cutting down, it's just horrible for the environment and they're cutting down old growth trees. In North America, we plant crappy pine trees that grow fast, and we chop them up and we turn them into the paper you use, and then immediately we replant those trees. So feel good about the fact that you're working in an industry that, to Dwight's point, is doing a good job. And my third point is on the cost. Look, we are not a sophisticated industry when it comes to systems. That's That's my answer. Mr. Featherman's showing an incredible piece of technology. Well, and hardware. That's the future, but we're not there yet. We're still working, Gutenberg and Ben Franklin are some of our subject matter experts is my bad joke, but there's a lot in the industry, even as we move to digital, that we do the old way. So I think we're playing a little bit of catch up with technology. And in that sense, it's good that EUDR will push us there, but it's expensive. We need to hire IT people, and we need to have subject matter experts in something that has nothing to do with ink or paper and or presses. And so give us a little grace, I guess, as we begin to work through this. Not sexy.
Not that sexy. So we just brought the sexy down for. Okay. Well, in thinking about sustainability, how are printers dealing with the latest sustainability requirements and surveys from publishers? Like, how does that affect overall pricing as well?
I mean, I think we probably see requests from publishers almost daily for, can you provide us answers to these 100 very important questions? And I think the biggest challenge as an industry is that there isn't a great deal of standardization at the moment. There isn't information that actually, what we want to do is we want to supply the information to everybody, because everybody's basically got the same questions and needs the same information. I think that's the real challenge, that everybody's trying to capture the information that they need for their organization, but there's no kind of central point where that's all kind of coming together at the moment. But there is a lot of requests. It's entirely legitimate. Businesses need to know. They need to audit their supply chain, their vendors. They should be. It's the right thing to do. But it just then creates a lot of work for kind of small teams in businesses to manage. So I think if as a sector, there'd be a way to kind of consolidate that, pull that together, and kind of work within some of those organizations and those governing bodies. I think that would be really good.
Okay. Commonality. I guess I was going to your point, your excellent point about the need to gather data. Look, when you send us a survey, do me a favor on behalf of North America. We're not typically enslaving young children and holding their passports as they work in our facilities, which is great. But you're sending me a survey with 11 pages of documentation that I have to prove to you that I'm not holding the passports of the enslaved young children that are working in my facility. Like, let's use some common sense here. I would love to be able to show you and document to you that I have good. There's a thing in the United States called OSHA. I mean, we take good care of our employees. Dwight mentioned it. The manufacturing facilities in America are generally spotless. Sure, there's some ink splatter and there's some dust, but they are safe workplaces with good safety standards and a lot of training. So how about you going back to, and I get it, and in Europe, maybe you can measure the kilowatt hour of energy used per every manufacturing unit that comes out. We can't in the United States. We don't. So we can tell you that we use this much energy in 2026, and we manufactured this many units in 2024, and we manufactured this many units. So on average, we used X amount of energy per unit. You got to work with us a little bit, because if there is no standard, please give us, again, the benefit of the doubt that we are trying to do what's right. We are, okay, here's my commercial. We are a low margin business. We just are. And so when your answer is, okay, let's get the manufacturer to supply all this information, A, I might not have the expertise. B, if I have to go out and acquire it, there's a cost to it. And C, if I have to document it, there's a cost to it. But you want the lowest unit cost price available. We need some help. We need to work together to solve that solution.
Yeah, and I'll put in a plug for BMI and other associations like BISG and IBPA. I know there's a printer checklist on sustainability that BISG and BMI worked on. So I think the scope of the different types of surveys is more of the problem. But getting, once you kind of fill out, if it's the more reasonable they are to fill out, the easier it is to comply with. So we are managing those requests as they come in, and the ones that just are a little over the top or take longer to fill out. But yeah, sustainability is definitely something something that's been in focus in our industry for a long time, but so has unit costs of our books. But I think we can feel good about kind of what was shared earlier, that we do have a good supply chain here in North America, and do have good forestry practices.
I know I've said this before, but I love what you guys said, but I think sustainability should also be talked about, the sustainability of this North American industry, from the publisher to the printer to the supplier. And all of these other environmental initiatives obviously are very important, but as you pointed out, this stuff has costs. And I love common sense. I mean, that's more my we U.S. suppliers compete against some overseas, and I'm not sure it's on a level playing field. So, and all of us need to have reliable supply chains, which is sustainability. I mean, Bill's warned us there's going to be less paper mills out there. There's going to be less printers out there too. And I think the reason our companies, all of us up here, are still alive is because we partner with our customers. We ask you what you need us to do. We talk about forecasting, which is unpredictable now, and we work because if we don't, the trends are just going to continue in the negative direction. So, a little plug of sustainability for the industry, because we're environmentally good guys, and all you guys say is and again, that's common sense. Why would you an unsafe factory? Why would you let your employees go on a piece of equipment that's not safe? That's for common sense.
And look, okay, so his slides, which were so easy to comprehend, but he said between China and the European Union, 40%, 47% of the books that you manufacture are done outside states. Great for you. Really wonderful that you get that savings. But we have to, when you call us with an emergency, we have to be here to answer. We got to work together. Half better. And remember this. Sorry, I'm Junior Bill Rojak. If you're a paper manufacturer and you can generate, Bill, what kind of margin? Better margin than our book paper. That's very difficult. So I think, to tag on to what we're all trying to say, we are good guys and gals and people. We are good people, and we like books, and we want books into. But you can't just say, "This is what I want." Give me, or I'll go find somebody else. Where are you going to go? You better cooperate with us. That sounds harsh. You know what? Maybe it's time. Would be beneficial to both of us if we really talk about what we can do together, because we are hamstrung with all of these issues. One thing to do when we get up every morning is want to deliver a good book to you, and it sounds corny, but it's true.
Matt, I'm making a plug to please have someone who's going to retire on the panel every time. Gets real sexy when the filter's gone. Loving every minute of this. Well, moving back to our heavier questions that I think all the publishers need to know. Have there been any changes made to book specs and or pricing to manage the cost of printing? So are publishers standardizing printing specs, moving to a cheaper paper stock?
I'll definitely put in a plug for that second one, moving to cheaper paper stocks. Yeah, we've seen, I think, that trend happened or started to occur, years ago. But we're seeing, as the price of inputs and paper costs have gone up, some of the people that were holding out, wanting to use an acid-free sheet, starting to capitulate a little bit. So we've certainly seen a move over to, both on moving from offset to groundwood, and there's definitely been a kind of an emerging market for high bright groundwoods as well. I think we're certainly seeing that.
I think in our market, the answer to the question is kind of no. I think we've seen publishers already move towards greater standardization. There's less options available, as we've kind of spoken about. So actually that consolidation has happened. I think we see people probably starting to value availability as much as they value price, because actually if it's not available and you're in peak season and you haven't got a book, then you haven't got anything to sell. So I think we're seeing that happen. In our digital on-demand businesses, I think we see that kind of move in kind of two directions. We have some which is moving generally to just more standardization of papers to suit the technology, to suit the throughput, to attract kind of effectively kind of lower pricing, but that's been going on for quite a long time. And then at the other side, we have a demand for a real kind of variety and varied product, but people are prepared to pay for that because they have a need. It provides something unique to their marketplace that happened. I think generally we've seen all of that happen. In terms of the costs for us, I mean, if we roll the clock back 2-3 years, kind of geopolitics, war in Ukraine had a massive impact in energy costs in UK and Europe. Now kind of seeing that stabilize generally. It could change tomorrow because the world's an uncertain place, but actually most of our pricing is pretty stable other than kind of annual labour increases that are generally mandated by our governments that are taking up kind of minimum wages, which then pushes everybody's wages up. So generally there is inflation in our costs every year, but they're probably way more predictable now than they were 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've been kind of snarky. I would like to say thank you to the entire publishing community because, well, here's why. Because I think the pandemic forced all of us to get real about what's available. And there had been a time where a senior production person would say, well, darn it, my publisher and my author want X. And we know they want that, but that may just not be realistic. And so I think you, the print production people and publications, have done an amazing job of educating up to help your customer understand the need to be flexible. And to that end, to your question, Shelby, I mean, yes, we're using less variety of papers. We're trying to standardize print trim sizes. We're suggesting as an industry changes to long-held norms that are good for everybody. And in the vast majority of the cases, the publisher gets it and embraces it. So that's a big thank you.
Everyone knows you're a great guy, Rich. You're not snarky. Yeah, and like Matt, you know, we saw these trends back in 2003 when we first put in our digital equipment. You had to limit paper selection, and standardizing trim sizes, we also know, is very beneficial. I still see new customers who are willing, if they come to us with a trim size that's a little bit out of the norm, they'll work with us because it's better for everybody. Look, if it's easier for us to manufacture, it's going to cost you less. But, you know, these trends of, you know, downgrading the paper to groundwood, we used to do everything on opaque or uncoated free sheet, you know, and then the workbooks all went, you know, to the groundwood, which was fine because it's a throwaway product. I'm not arguing that. Look, we're all in a low margin business that's struggling to figure out how to survive in this new world. If Al Gore didn't invent the internet, it might have been easier for us. But Bill made a point, which I thought was excellent. You know, if we keep downgrading, like putting groundwood, and I think you're a case-bound book, you said, will that be compelling enough to sell a book for $30? And I hope you don't mind, but Keith Riegert said a great thing at one of these talks, is that we as an industry have not done a great job selling the value of the book. I mean, and I think his point was, how much time do you spend with a book versus what do you spend for a video or streaming a movie? You know, books are wonderful, and they take you away, or they help you learn something, and they're really valuable. So I think we've got to discuss this dichotomy here of that we're creating a really valuable product, but yet we're not really helping people appreciate how valuable it is because, you know, like somebody said, we're a low margin business. And I always think that printers are kind of on the bottom of the food chain. So we're in a really low margin business.
Thank you. And I think you're right. Books are amazing and they're forever. You know, videos can go away, but that book will always be there. I think we're leaving it open for questions. I lost Matt. Did he go away? Did he go? Okay. Well, I'm going to do it then. Oh, you're questions for the panel? Again, I'm not out there, so you guys gotta ask the questions.
Mr. O'Leary.
Maybe start with Matt. Matt, you've been involved in a lot of conversations within BISG about how you work with publisher partners to plan work, to effectively deal with contingencies, things go up and down. Maybe say a few words about that.
Yeah, so we really try to work, closely with our publishing partners to look at, ways to streamline cost as well as to, schedule work during peak seasons so that publishers are able to have some sort of, baseline capacity that if they're putting, say 50,000 books a month, through our facility, it doesn't all have to be, one title. So we've, out of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of, adjusting to kind of working with our publishers in a more collaborative way to allow them the flexibility to reprint this title that's, taking off because the rate of movement of a given title can change, so drastically. So yeah, definitely. And then on the kind of I feel like our publishers have done a good job of asking us what our needs are and what can help improve the situation on our end. So it seems like we're in a pretty good place working business to business with our publishing partners.
Similarly to how important it is to have a good working relationship and a collaborative relationship with your publishing partners, can you speak a little bit about how important it's been in your business to have really solid relationships with your vendor partners and your supplier partners as it pertains to this uncertain global supply chain?
We try to treat our vendors like we want to be treated. And, we're not the biggest printer, but we never ran out of paper. And that's even in tight markets. And that helped us in many situations. We gained market share. It was really valuable. I think it came down to the fact that we were loyal to our paper supplier and we paid our bills on time. And I think that loyalty is really important. That's part of how we figure this stuff out together. We constantly had different paper mills coming to us and said, I'll offer you cheaper stock. I'll offer you cheaper stock. We kind of knew in the back of our mind, and said if we did that, we're risking that loyalty, which goes so far in tight markets. Or, if a mill is potentially going to change a machine and working with us to help us. So to me, and that's how we want to be treated by our customers. It has to be a partnership. It's not who can give me the lowest price. There's a lot more to it, right? So truly treating them as partners. And that was kind of a new term that came up during COVID. We've been doing that for 100 years. I mean, that's how you succeed in business. So
I used to think that the worst job in manufacturing a printing building was the scheduler, because every day, by every hour, the size and pieces of the puzzle changed. And that was just, my brain couldn't get around that. That's still a very difficult job. But I think that the supply chain manager purchasing group may be the toughest job right now, because what they can buy is changing every day. And whether we're not just talking EUDR, we're talking about a mill decides that they're going to take down a machine, a mill decides that they're going to make a significant change. I'm focusing on paper. We get ink from only so many people. There's only one supplier left, I think, in the United States that makes thread. I mean, so it's a great question, Kara. We're spending an incredible amount of energy doing exactly what Dwight's saying. We have to go to these people and say, we have to trust you, and you have to trust us, and we have to plan ahead, because it's very difficult to run any business in the United States, but especially one in an industry that's relatively small.
Yeah, I think even, I think your point is very valid, and, being treated like, treating others like you want to be treated is super important. And, not, for example, some people will spot buy, paper, but but being able to be predictable to our suppliers is, I think, something that goes a long way with them.
I think for us, so we took on a new supply chain director, procurement director, maybe 3-4 years ago, and I think that role changed since that person joined. Previously, it was I'm in my office, you come to me, and we negotiate. Now that guy is probably one of the better travel people in the company, because actually he's going to see them. He wants to understand their businesses and talk to them. It's about the partnerships, which everybody's kind of spoken about. But actually, our procurement director will now be involved in conversations with our customers as well, because actually he needs to hear, to understand, to kind of work that through the whole supply piece.
So I think it's fair to say that the pandemic put the supply chain finally and deservedly on everybody's radar screen, at least to use a phrase that New York police use, allegedly. But my question for you is, are you seeing more C-level engagement with the supply chain, or is this still a bottom-up, not meaning to be disparaging to production departments, where the C-level of the organization continues to be distant from day-to-day operations?
I mean, I'll answer that. For me, we have joint managing directors for our business in the UK, and they spend 2-3 days a week out with clients. So it's a continual piece of their job. It's full engagement at all times.
Agreed. Our senior leadership they must be exhausted. I mean, there's so many issues that they're facing, but clearly, I think one of your questions was, are they talking at C-level to our suppliers at a C-level? And or to our customers at C-level? Absolutely. But also to our suppliers. You know, we're a shrinking base, and we better figure it out together. And I think we're doing a very good job about that, by the way. Not Sheridan, the industry.
This is a question I've had posed to me by several book designers, and I've not been able to answer, and so I'm just pitching it out there. Are there any sustainability or ecological concerns with the sprayed edges and all that phenomenon that's going on? Does it affect paper recyclability, anything like that? What can I tell these people who ask me about this?
None of us want to go on the record to get sued. No, I think the short answer is no. I think that I believe that the materials that are used because they're coming into facilities that are OSHA managed, the edge printing is using the kind of inkjet ink that is used in all of this equipment.
Yeah, it's generally using water-based ink, so I don't think there's an environmental concern for that.
And the edge spraying is also it's coming from an ink. They blend it at an ink manufacturer, and they use the same safe technology that we use on all of our products.
Thanks. If I could go back to digital printing again, I think one of the questions I have is there's a lot of focus on the actual printing, but I'm curious about more of the other operations, finishing, say, perf drill, case binding, other things of that sort. Where do you think that stands, the state of the art in terms of quick turnarounds? And do you see any of those in particular as a stumbling block that maybe publishers should think about?
For print on demand, the biggest pressures we see are speed and turnaround time, and that tends to lead to more standardization, and less operations to finish the book. We do offer kind of coil bound, saddle stitch, all of those things, but generally they have to be on an extended lead time for clients just because of the other steps in the operations that you have. All of the solutions that we have are quite manual. There's not huge amounts of automation in there, because I get the machine manufacturers probably don't want to go and build big bits of kit that aren't going to make huge volumes of product. So I think it's a real challenge in terms of how much volume is there, how much demand is there in the market. But generally, a lot of those things are fairly kind of artisan in terms of the solutions that we have available to us to produce them for you.
So perforating happens on the folder. So if you're producing a folded signature, it should be able to be perfed. Drilling is some of those offline operations. Probably, there's more robust capacity probably on an offset platform. But I'm not sure if digitally whether you guys are seeing much demand for perf and kind of handwork applications.
Not really, no.
Well, thank you very much to our esteemed panel. Give it up for everybody here. Thank you, everyone.